We know what this sadism looks like. It looks like Derek Chauvin nonchalantly choking to death George Floyd as his police colleagues watch impassively. It looks like Andrew Brown Jr., shot 5 times by police in North Carolina, including once in the back of the head. It looks like Abner Louima, who had a broomstick pushed up his rectum by police in a bathroom at the 70th Precinct Station House in Brooklyn, requiring 3 major operations to repair the internal injuries. It looks like the Navy SEAL Special Operations Chief Edward Gallagher randomly shooting to death unarmed civilians and using a hunting knife to repeatedly stab an injured, sedated 17-year-old Iraqi prisoner, and then photographing himself with a corpse.
What's up, YouTube family? Welcome back to my space. This is Evans Rayola. Guys, thank you so much for tuning to watch today's episode. I do not take your support for granted. So guys, on today's video, we want to talk about American sadism. American sadism defines every cultural, social, and political experience in the United States, and we see that each and every day. We see it with the police brutality. We even see it in the murderous and fatal wars that America prosecutes. You know, it could be in Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, and even Iraq. We see a lot of sadism in America. We see how the black people struggle in the American system, the constant racial abuses. We see how the black folks are discriminated, systems working against them. It's also expressed in the cultural glorification of violence by mass media, the state, and entertainment. There are a lot of ways that we see American sadism, and people wonder what will happen in America in the years to come. Will America be punished? You know, will the systems, the government of America be punished for what they've been doing over the years? We see right now America trying to meddle with the president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, and you wonder, when will they stop? America is just the center stage of anything that happens in the world. So guys, today we want to uncover American sadism, and guys, I hope this video will be one that will be able to teach people. So to speak to us today is Chris Hedges. I want you to hear this video. Once the video is done, we will get back and do a critical analysis about the same. Let's watch this together, family.
So this talk is called American Sadism. Sadism defines nearly every cultural, social, and political experience in the United States. It is expressed in the unchecked greed of an oligarchic elite that has seen its wealth increase during the pandemic by $1.1 trillion, while the country has suffered the sharpest rise in its poverty rate in more than 50 years. It is expressed in the wanton killings by police of unarmed citizens in cities such as Minneapolis. It is expressed in the enhanced interrogation techniques used by the CIA at secret black sites, Guantanamo Bay, and in our prisons at home. It is expressed in the separation of children from their parents, where they are held as if they were dogs in a kennel. It is expressed in the pornification of American society, where women are tortured, beaten, degraded, and sexually violated, often by numerous men in porn films, and then discarded after a few weeks or months with severe trauma, along with sexually transmitted diseases and vaginal and anal tears that must be repaired surgically. It is expressed in the incel movement that perpetuates violent assaults against women by men who say they have been spurned or ignored by women. It is expressed in the predatory healthcare system where, as Steve Brill writes, a trip to the emergency room for chest pains that turn out to be indigestion can exceed the cost of a semester at college. Simple lab work done during a few days in a hospital can be more expensive than a new car. And a drug that requires $300 to make, and that the manufacturer sells to a hospital for between $3,000 and $3,500 can cost the patient to whom it is prescribed $13,702. It is legally permissible in the United States for corporations to hold sick children hostage while their parents bankrupt themselves to save their sons or daughters. This sadism is expressed in payday loans, for-profit prisons, the privatization of public education and public utilities, and the rise of for-profit mercenary armies. It is expressed in the cultural glorification of violence by mass media, the state, and the entertainment and gaming industries. It is expressed in the nihilistic mass shootings at schools, including elementary schools and workplaces. And it is expressed in the murderous and futile wars we prosecute or support in Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. The historian Johann Huizinga, writing about the twilight of the Middle Ages, argued that as things fall apart, sadism is embraced to cope with the hostility of an indifferent universe. No longer bound by a common purpose, a ruptured society retreats into hedonism and the cult of the self. It celebrates, as corporations on Wall Street or popular reality television shows celebrate, the classic traits of psychopaths: superficial charm, grandiosity, and self-importance, a need for constant stimulation, a penchant for lying, deception, and manipulation, and the incapacity for remorse or guilt. Get what you can as fast as you can before someone else gets it. This is the state of nature, the war of all against all Thomas Hobbes saw as the consequence of social disintegration, a world in which life becomes solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. It is a world in which powerful men like Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein reduce the bodies and selfhoods of their victims to nothing. We know what this sadism looks like. It looks like Derek Chauvin nonchalantly choking to death George Floyd as his police colleagues watch impassively. It looks like Andrew Brown Jr., shot 5 times by police in North Carolina, including once in the back of the head. It looks like Abner Louima, who had a broomstick pushed up his rectum by police in a bathroom at the 70th Precinct Station House in Brooklyn, requiring 3 major operations to repair the internal injuries. It looks like the Navy SEAL Special Operations Chief Edward Gallagher, randomly shooting to death unarmed civilians and using a hunting knife to repeatedly stab an injured, sedated 17-year-old Iraqi prisoner, and then photographing himself with a corpse. It looks like Iraqi civilians, few of whom had anything to do with the insurgency, naked, bound, beaten, and sexually humiliated and raped, and at times murdered by army guards and private contractors in Abu Ghraib. It looks like the prisoners in Abu Ghraib who were routinely dragged across the prison floor by a rope tied to their penises and were sodomized by chemical lights, or had chemical lights snapped open so the phosphorus liquid could be poured over their naked bodies. The leaked pictures from Abu Ghraib, are the true face of America. The hooded man, a dark, caped figure standing on a box, arms outstretched, wires attached to his fingers. Or the naked, leashed man lying at the feet of the female American soldier in camouflage pants who holds his leash, one end wrapped around his neck in her hand. Why is the malaise of a dying civilization expressed through sadism rather than a kind of righteous anger? And here we must turn to Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche warned that those who are humiliated and disempowered are poisoned by ressentiment. Because they have been stripped of agency, they lack the power to harm those who they believe harm them. In short, there is no cathartic release. Ressentiment is bred from damaged self-esteem. It festers and corrodes the soul. The powerless, and here Nietzsche is writing about Christianity as a slave religion, must express their ressentiment obliquely and surreptitiously. Hence the coded racism, Islamophobia, and supposed yearning for a return to the traditional family and quote-unquote Christian values. Ressentiment is produced by feelings of inferiority, failure, and worthlessness. And this ressentiment, fueled by self-loathing, expresses itself through sadism, what Nietzsche calls wrecking the will of those who are weaker or more vulnerable. Nietzsche understood that this wrecking the will of others imparts a perverted, sadistic pleasure. He writes in On the Genealogy of Morals that to see others suffer does one good, to make others suffer even more. Without cruelty there is no festival, and in punishment there is so much that is festive. The ressentiment in American society, the political scientist Wendy Brown writes, is born not only from feelings of powerlessness and worthlessness, but feelings of dethronement and lost entitlement. It explains what she calls the permanent politics of revenge, of attacking those blamed for dethronement, white maleness, those blamed for the dethronement of white maleness, feminists, multiculturalists, globalists, who both unseat and disdain them. For this reason, the rage cannot, as it could be in Christian theology, sublimated into self-abnegation and a call to love thy neighbor. There is, in short, nothing to mitigate or redirect this ressentiment. Its pure expression is nihilism and sadism. Trump embodied this dark ethic. Revenge is his sole philosophy of life. Those gripped by ressentiment are no longer able to create. They can only destroy. They gleefully ignite their own funeral pyre. Laws, institution, and bureaucratic structures are deformed to serve the interests of a tiny cabal, a rapacious elite, which enriches itself at the expense of everyone else. All are made to bow before the dictates of what Max Weber called the inanimate machine. The inanimate machine forces the vast majority into the mass, but it allows a selected few, willing to do its dirty work, to rise above the multitude. These privileged few are given the license and authority to carry out the acts of sadism that have become the primary forms of social control. These enforcers do this work vigorously, for their greatest fear is being pushed back into the mass. The more these foot soldiers for the elite insult, persecute, torture, humiliate, and kill, the more they seem to magically widen the divide between themselves and their victims. And this is why black police and correctional corrections officers can be as cruel and sometimes crueler than their white counterparts. The sadism eradicates, at least momentarily, the sadist's feelings of worthlessness, vulnerability, and susceptibility to pain and death. It imparts feelings of omnipotence. It is pleasurable. I was beaten by Saudi military police and later by Saddam Hussein's secret police when I was taken prisoner in Basra shortly after the First Gulf War. Those who beat me enjoyed their work. I could see it on their faces. Israel's abuse of the Palestinians, the assaults of Muslims on Muslims and girls in India, and the denigration of Muslims in countries we occupy are part of the scourge of sadism in service to an inanimate machine that has become global. Feminists have long understood that sadism runs like an electric current through male sexual desire. Pornography is about the fantasy of men who are omnipotent, who have the power to torture and physically abuse girls and women, who in porn beg to be degraded. Sexual fun and sexual passion in the privacy of the male imagination are inseparable from the brutality of male history, Andrea Dworkin writes. The private world of sexual dominance that men demand as their right and their freedom is the mirror image of the public world of sadism and atrocity that men consistently and self-righteously deplore. It is in the male experience of pleasure that one finds the meaning of male history. Women, of course, are not immune from acts of sadism. Ilse Koch, known as the bitch of Buchenwald with her husband, the commandant of the death camp, used to throw prisoners into bears' cages to watch them get ripped apart and devoured. The Chilean, Adriana Rivas, facing extradition to Chile from Australia, reportedly tortured prisoners by strapping them to metal bunk beds rigged with electric current and sending shocks throughout their bodies, or suffocated them to death with plastic bags during the regime of Augusto Pinochet. But Dworkin is right to highlight sadism as inherent in male expressions of total and unaccountable power. And this is why sadism is the chief characteristic of imperialism. Jean Armory, who was in the Belgian resistance in World War II and who was captured and tortured by the Gestapo in 1943, defines sadism as the radical negation of the other, the simultaneous denial of both the social principle and the reality principle. In a sadist world, torture, destruction, and death are triumphant. And such a world clearly has no hope of survival. On the contrary, he desires to transcend the world, to achieve total sovereignty by negating fellow human beings, which he sees as representing a peculiar kind of hell. Armory's point is important. A sadistic society is about collective self-destruction. It is the apotheosis of a society deformed by overwhelming experiences of loss, alienation, and stasis. The only way left to affirm yourself in a failed society is to destroy. Johann Huizinga, in his book, Waning of the Middle Ages, noted that the dissolution of medieval society provoked what he called the violent tenor of life. Today, this violent tenor of life drives people to carry out wanton police murders, evict families, court-ordered bankruptcies, the denial of Medicare to the sick, suicide bombings, and mass shootings. Sadism imparts the rush and pleasure, often with heavy sexual overtones, which lures us towards what Sigmund Freud called the death instinct. The instinct to destroy all forms of life, including our own. When enveloped by a death saturated world, death, ironically, is embraced as the cure. Joseph Conrad saw enough of the world as a sea captain to know the irredeemable corruption of humanity. The noble virtues that drove characters like Kurtz in Heart of Darkness into the jungle veiled the abject self-interest, unchecked greed and murder that defines all imperial projects. Conrad was in the Congo in the late 19th century when the Belgian monarch King Leopold, in the name of Western civilization and anti-slavery, was plundering the country. The Belgian occupation, which turned the Congo into a rubber plantation, resulted in the death by disease, starvation, and murder of some 10 million Congolese. In Conrad's short story, An Outpost of Progress, he writes of two white European traders, Collier and Kuyerts, who were sent to a remote trading station in the Congo. The mission is endowed with a great moral purpose to export European civilization to Africa. But the boredom and lack of constraints swiftly turn the two men into savages. They trade slaves for ivory. They get into a feud over dwindling food supplies, and Kuyerts shoots and kills his unarmed companion. They were two perfectly insignificant and incapable individuals, Conrad wrote, whose existence is only rendered possible through the high organization of civilized crowds. Few men realize that their life, the very essence of their character, their capabilities and their audacities, are only the expression of their belief in the safety of their surroundings. The courage, the composure, the confidence, the emotions and principles, every great and every insignificant thought belongs not to the individual, but to the crowd. To the crowd that believes blindly in the irresistible force of its institutions and its morals, in the power of its police and of its opinion. But the contact with pure, unmitigated savagery, with primitive nature and primitive man, brings sudden and profound trouble to the heart. To this sentiment of being alone of one's kind, to the clear perception of the loneliness of one's thought, of one's sensations, to the negation of the habitual, which is safe, there is added the affirmation of the unusual, which is dangerous. A suggestion of things vague, uncontrollable, and repulsive, whose discomposing intrusion excites the imagination and tries the civilized nerves of the foolish and the wise alike. The managing director of the great civilizing company, for as Conrad notes, civilization follows trade, arrives by steamer at the end of the story. He is not met at the dock by his two agents. He climbs the steep bank to the trading station with the captain and engine driver behind him. The director finds Kuyerts, who after the murder committed suicide by hanging himself by a leather strap from a cross that marked the grave of the previous station chief. His toes are a couple inches above the ground, his arms hang stiffly down, and inadvertently, he was putting out a swollen tongue at the managing director. Sadism is carried out in the name of a moral good to protect Western civilization, quote-unquote Christian values, democracy, the master race, liberté, égalité, fraternité, the workers' paradise, the new man, or scientific rationalism. Sadism will mend the flaws in the human species. The jargon varies, but the dark sentiment is the same. Honor, justice, compassion, and freedom are ideas that have no converts, Conrad writes. They are only people without knowing, understanding, or feeling who intoxicate themselves with words, shout them out, imagining they believe them without believing in anything else but profit, personal advantage, and their own satisfaction. For man is a cruel animal, he went on. His cruelty must be organized. Society is essentially criminal, or it wouldn't exist. It is selfishness that saves everything, absolutely everything. Everything that we abhor, everything that we love. Bertrand Russell said of Conrad, "I felt, though I do not know whether he would have accepted such an image, that he thought of civilized and morally tolerable life as a dangerous walk on a thin crust of barely cooled lava, which at any moment might break and let the unwary sink into fiery depths." Kurtz, the self-deluded, megalomaniac ivory trader in Heart of Darkness, ends by planting the shriveled heads of murdered Congolese on pikes outside his remote trading station. But Kurtz is also highly educated and refined. Conrad describes him as an orator, writer, poet, musician, and the respected chief agent of the Ivory Company's inner station. He is an emissary of pity and science and progress. Kurtz was a universal genius and a very remarkable person. He is a prodigy, at once gifted and multi-talented. He went to Africa fired by noble ideals and virtues. He ended his life as a self-deluded tyrant who thought he was a god. His mother was half English, his father was half French. Conrad writes of Kurtz, "All Europe contributed to the making of Kurtz." And by the by, I learned that most appropriately the International Society for the Suppression of Savage Customs had entrusted him with the making of a report for its future guidance. He began with the argument that we whites, from the point of development we had arrived at, must necessarily appear to them, the savages, in the nature of supernatural beings. We approach them with the might as of a deity, and so on and so on. By the simple exercise of our will, we can exert a power for good practically unbounded, etc., etc. From that point, he soared and took me with him. The peroration was magnificent, though difficult to remember, you know. It gave me the notion of an exotic immensity ruled by an august benevolence. It made me tingle with enthusiasm. This was the unbounded power of eloquence, of words, of burning, noble words. There were no practical hints to interrupt the magic current of phrases, unless a kind note at the foot of the last page, scrawled evidently much later in an unsteady hand, may be regarded as the exposition of a method. It was very simple, and at the end of the moving appeal to every altruistic sentiment, it blazed at you, luminous and terrifying, like a flash of lightning in a serene sky. Exterminate all the brutes.
Family, that was a very, very powerful speech by Chris Hedges as he tries to uncover what America is doing to people over the years in a video that he titled, American Sadism. Sadism is seen in all spheres, of America. It could be cultural, social, or political experiences in the United States. Many a times we see a lot of rot with the systems of leadership in America. Number one, American sadism has been experienced in the killings by police to unarmed citizens. Family, of the topic by Carol Anderson when she tries to explain the white rage in America. She speaks about police brutality, how a guy, was it called Amadou Diallo or something, when he was gunned down, shot 6 times. He wasn't armed, he was just from work, just moving around his estate, probably going for shopping after work. He was gunned down, and he wasn't any armed. And this is something that is perpetuated in the American systems today. Black folks are easily gunned down. Look at George Floyd, when he was murdered in cold blood. When people started going on the streets and saying that black lives do matter, look at what they did to George Floyd then. The American systems has a lot of sadism in itself. Then it is also experienced, or rather expressed, in the enhanced interrogation techniques used by the CIA and our prisons. There's a lot of sadness in the systems in America. It's also experienced with the separation of children with their parents, where they are held as if they are dogs in the kennel. It's experienced where women are tortured, beaten, and sexually violated by numerous men in porn films, then left with trauma and sexual transmitted diseases. Family, what's wrong? At times I see videos of people explain the wrath that the American systems are yet to get. What they've been doing to humanity. It could be racism, it could be discrimination that black folks go through. There's a lot of sadness in America. Babylon will soon fall down because of what it's doing to the humankind. You know, they're trying to dehumanize human beings in Babylon. By some of these things that we are talking about today, there is a lot of sadism in American systems. It's also experienced or expressed in the cultural glorification of violence by mass media, the state, and the entertainment and gaming industries. It's also expressed in the nihilistic mass shootings of schools, including elementary schools and workplaces. It's also expressed in the murderous and fatal wars we prosecute or support in Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Family, you see many a times America come through to support some of these wars. You see them trying to fight countries. We saw what the American government did in the days of Libya when they took their leader, they assassinated him. You know, during the days that Obama was the president of the United States. It was something that came with pride to America. Obama announced it so happy that finally they were able to kill the president of Libya. What has happened in Libya since then? We've seen Libya going down and down and down. America has always been fearing African leaders or other leaders in the world who are actually striving to make systems work in their country. We see what right now they are doing with Burkina Faso. They are trying to label lies so that they may be able to blindfold us. But this time, we are people who are woke. We are people who have knowledge and wisdom and know that Ibrahim Traore is doing a nice work. America really likes supporting countries, you know, to take them down when they see that their leaders are doing well. That's why they are sponsoring some of these wars outside there. So guys, I went further to do more research in regards to what Chris Hedges was trying to portray in this video. And before we go further, Chris Hedges delves deeply into the concept of American sadism, portraying it as a perspective force that infiltrates various facets of US society, from cultural expression to institutional structures. He argues that this entrenched cruelty is not merely incidental but systematically embedded within the nation's framework. You know, these things are just put there systemically. So guys, I want us to go deeper and get to understand his concept on the American sadism. Sadism as a mechanism of social control. Hedges posits that American institutions ranging from healthcare and education to law enforcement and the military are designed to perpetuate suffering among the marginalized. They want to ensure that the people who are suffering, the marginalized people, even continue to suffer more and more. They actually do not care. He highlights the exorbitant cost of medical care, the exploitation inherent in for-profit prisons, and the aggressive tactics employed by law enforcement as manifestations of institutionalized sadism. These systems, according to Hedges, are not malfunctioning, but are operating precisely as intended, serving the interests of the powerful elite by maintaining the hierarchy of dominance and submission. They want to ensure that the marginalized people will always, want, to be serving them, serving their interests. They want to be dominant. They want the marginalized people to always submit to them. Then you have the psychological roots. Drawing from Friedrich concept of resentment, Hedges explores how feelings of powerlessness and humiliation can fester into a desire to inflict suffering on others. The psychological state leads individuals to derive pleasure from those perceived as weaker, reinforcing a cycle of cruelty. Additionally, Hedges references the notion of the death instinct, suggesting that in a society riddled with despair, destructive behaviors become a means of asserting control or finding purpose. Then we also have the cultural manifestation on the entertainment and media. Hedges critiques the American entertainment industry for normalizing and glorifying violence and degradation. He points to reality television, violent video games, and certain forms of pornography as examples where cruelty is not only depicted but celebrated. This cultural saturation of sadistic content desensitizes the public and perpetuates a societal acceptance of inhumanity. Guys, when we started the video, he mentioned that there is a lot of inhumane behaviors in America, and America is yet to face a lot of wrath. There is a lot of rot in America that are supported by the government systems. They want to ensure that the marginalized people will always beg them. They want to ensure that they are dominant, you know, to the local people. Guys, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about this concept of American sadism. What makes you sad, in the layman's language, in America? Is it the police brutality? Is it the systems that are set to always work against the black man? It could be the employment opportunities. It could be the consistent racism. It could be constant police shootings. What just makes you sad about the US? Let me know in the comment section down below. Kindly like this video so that it can be recommended to other YouTube users. Guys, last but not least, kindly do consider subscribing to the channel. We are currently on the road to 50,000 subscribers, and I cannot do it without your support. Kindly share this video widely with your friends and relatives. The goal of this channel has always been to showcase black history, to ensure that black folks all over the world are empowered and tell black stories the black way. Because when we give the white supremacists an opportunity to tell our story, they'll always whitewash it, to ensure that now we get confused and for them to always be in control. Guys, thank you so much, and see you all in our next episode. Goodbye for now.